Author Donna Jodhan presents The Real Bank Robber. They were three very close friends, had known each other since kindergarten, and had practically grown up together. They hung out with each other and were very good students. They were quiet boys, and each with their own ambition, a very secret one that they each had in common. They all went to the same university and did extremely well in their chosen field. It was just before graduation, and something happened among these three amigos. One night, over a few beers, they made a secret pact and agreed to check in again in a year's time to the date. That infamous pact went off the tracks and ended up in murder. The three amigos can only speculate and hope that it was not any of them who was involved. They meet at the appointed date and time, shortly after the crime has been committed. None of them is prepared for the final outcome.
Hello there, it's Detective DJ, and welcome to one of our shows called The Real Bank Robber. I hope that everyone is having a great day, has had a great week, and I hope that you are continuing to enjoy our episodes. Detective DJ and the Crime Crushers, starring me as Detective DJ. By now you are quite familiar with our team: Dr. Shay Harrington, our resident psychologist, Dr. Ryan Martini, our crime scene specialist, Dr. Nicholas Gasquet, our pathologist, and Alex Kirchhoff, our whiz-kid guru, who dabbles in anything and everything, but his specialty is computers. Oh, and I almost forgot good old Chip Sanderson, my right-hand man. So, welcome aboard, and I know that you have already heard the description to this episode. This episode has a funny name to it. It's called The Real Bank Robber. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as you enjoy or have enjoyed everything else. So, without much ado, let's get into our episode for this time, called The Real Bank Robber. Well, let me tell you what's happening moments just before the crime takes place. It is a beautiful spring day, and all is well. Everyone is simply just happy to welcome the spring season, because the weather is warm and mild. Heavy winter coats have been replaced with lightweight jackets, and thick boots have been exchanged for stylish walking shoes. The birds are happy as they can be. And they can be heard everywhere. They can be heard singing and chirping in the gently swaying trees. The fragrant scent of flowers is everywhere, ever present in the fresh, crisp air. And even the cats and dogs are out looking around. Wow! A young lady could be seen walking purposefully towards a popular clothing store. And a young man stands on the street corner admiring her progress, while across the street, two neatly dressed men stand in deep conversation. This is a scene moments before this particular crime takes place. So now, what's going to happen next? Let's go to the scene of the crime as reported in by Dr. Ryan Martini. The main downtown branch of a bank has been robbed, and it has been cordoned off. There is a heavy police presence around the building, and inside the branch all is very still. About a dozen tellers are standing against a wall, and several others are sitting in chairs behind the counters, and a number of customers are sitting in chairs around the outer perimeter. This is the crime scene. A man has been killed and lies face down on the marble floor, and it is close to one of the teller's counters. Stacks of crisp money lie close to his body, and pools of blood are spreading rapidly around his body. The blood is inching ever so close to the outer stack of bills, but no one can do anything about it for now. Just think of it. In a plant pot standing not too far away, the handle of a small penknife could be seen jutting out of the soil, and a closer look reveals that it is blood-stained. A man is standing in the hallway leading to the vaults, and he's holding a young pregnant lady to his chest, and he has a gun pointed at her heart. No one is being allowed in or out of the branch. Some are crying softly, while others could be seen praying, while still others are staring straight ahead. A standoff is in progress, and TV cameras have begun to arrive. But it is all over after about an hour. The man with the gun surrenders, the pregnant lady is set free, and the dead body is taken away. Now the police must do their job, and they have placed a blackout on what has just taken place. This is the crime scene, and now we're going to hear what our resident psychologist Dr. Shay Harrington has to say about all of this. Why could this have been the perfect location? And according to Dr. Shay, it is where the money was. And the perfect occasion, according to Dr. Shay, it was because it was on a very busy day in the bank. And the victim's reason for being there, according to Dr. Shay, she always has something to say, he was there to rob the bank. This is a very, very interesting theory being put forth by our Dr. Shay. But let's go on. All right. According to Chip, he is saying that the motives for this crime could have been anything like this. Someone had simply wanted to rob a bank. My goodness. Or could there have been another reason? I mean, simply wanting to rob a bank is a motive, but there must be a motive behind a motive. Well, according to Dr. Shay, she has a profile for the suspect. It is not, according to her, it is not certain if the suspect had murder on their mind when they entered the bank. It is possible that all that they had wanted to do was to simply just rob a bank. But she emphasizes that simply should not be taken in context here. It's just maybe all they wanted to do was rob a bank, not murder anybody. But then something may have spooked them, and then they had panicked. It is not certain as to whether or not they had had a firm plan in mind. The stacks of money may be an indicator that the suspect may have panicked at the last moment. Well, I don't know, but we'll go on to what Chip has to say with his investigation. Cameras show that a man neatly dressed in slacks and a button-down light blue Oxford shirt had entered the bank at around 11 a.m. on the morning in question. He had seemed hesitant at first and had looked tentatively around for a few minutes. Then he had approached the head teller's desk, where another man of similar build was already standing there. According to the very nervous and shaken teller, she did not think that the two had known each other, and as they had both stared straight ahead of them, barely looking at each other, let alone acknowledging each other. One of the men had then withdrawn a slip of paper from his wallet and had pushed it towards her. She had quickly read it and had done her best not to panic. The instructions on the paper were that she was to enter her cash box and to hand over all of her bills. Or first, she was to place it in a large envelope, seal it, and then casually pass it over to him. Simple. But she was also told that if she had attempted to attract any attention, she would be killed immediately, because the bank robber had a gun with a silencer in his possession. The teller first remembers having emptied her cash box of all of the bills, and then she had stacked them in neat piles and had placed rubber bands around them. And then, as she was reaching for an envelope in which to place the bills, the robber had reached for them. He was just gathering them up when the second man had reached for them, and before she had known it, one man had stabbed the other. And this is all that she had remembered. The bank cameras showed that one man had fallen to the floor, and that the stacks of bills had gone flying, and after this, the camera had gone blank. Because it is probable that the killer had put a piece of paper over its lenses as he had walked by, and somehow the outer security cameras had failed to pick him up as he walked out. The teller could not say which man had demanded the money and which man had stabbed the other. As this was going on, another drama was taking place in the bank. The cameras showed that a man dressed in a business suit had entered the bank at around the same time that this first drama was taking place, and he had walked directly to the counter that had looked after safety deposit boxes, and he had asked to gain entry to his safety deposit box. A young pregnant teller had been told to escort him into the designated area, but on the way in, something had happened. The man had waited until they were alone, and then he had made his move. He quickly withdrew a gun from his waistband and had stuck it into the small of her back. And he had warned her not to make a sound, and then he had made his demand. He had told her to take him to the president of the bank, but as she was about to comply, the first drama had broken loose. The man had spun the pregnant teller around and had marched her back up the hall towards the front. Then when he had seen the police enter, he had shoved the pregnant teller in front of him and had pointed the gun at her heart. There were two separate matters for investigators to deal with. In the case of the man who had pointed the gun at the pregnant teller, this attempted hold-up seemed to have been a coincidence, and that it had happened on the same day as the killing. There did not appear to be any direct relationship between the two. The killer and the stabbing incident, or the matter surrounding the stabbing incident, were identified a few days later. And the search of the killer's apartment turned up a diary with certain names. A search of his laptop's hard drive also uncovered certain emails, and his cell phone also yielded certain information. Banking details also helped to provide some vital information. The police had waited until the three amigos had gathered as prearranged, and they had allowed them to settle down to their meal before they swooped in for the kill. The killer, having told the police about this meeting, preliminary investigations uncovered the following. The three amigos had made a pact to see who could carry off a bank robbery. It had been one of their playful childhood dreams, and they had all three had decided to explore it. Each was supposed to have gone off on his own and developed a plan. And a year later to the date, they were supposed to meet to discuss further, but they had decided not to act until after they had met. It just happened that the anniversary date had fallen a few days after the crime had taken place. One of the suspects had developed a very simple plan. He would hire someone to do it for him. And because he had not had the time to get fully involved, nor did he want to because of his job. He loved the thrill of it all, but he was not willing to risk his profession and his young family. His plan was to have put it down on paper, but not go any further. Suspect 2 took this challenge much more seriously. He loved the intrigue and did not think that he had anything to lose. He was single and used to spend much of his spare time designing and developing computer games. He had recently developed a game called To Catch a Killer, and it was based on a secret agent on the loose. Suspect 3 was just itching to get going on this challenge, as he had always had a strong dislike of banks, and he had spent much time developing a simple but very effective plan. One could say that he had a mild obsession with this project, and he had felt that he could easily carry it off because he did not feel that he did not have anything to lose. He too was single and with no dependents. At the end of the day, this crazy dream was never intended to have included murder. Chip has identified the following suspects for our examination. The first one was Nyron Calley. He was a young software engineer. The next was Kurt Redden, a young marketing executive. And the third was Lucas Perry, a young stock exchange executive. According to Dr. Nicholas Gasquet, the cause of death was as follows: a single stab wound to the chest, and death was instantaneous. We're figuring that this is how it could have been done, and this is according to Dr. Nicholas Gasquet. One man had entered the bank and had gone to the counter. Another man had entered shortly after and had gone to the same counter. The first man had probably taken a slip of paper from his wallet and had passed it over to the teller. She had complied, and as she had finished putting the money into stacks, the first man had reached over to take it from her, and then the second man had tried to take it from him. And what could have ensued is that the second man would have stabbed the first man, and then he may have panicked, and as he was leaving, stuck the penknife into a plant pot. He did have the presence of mind, however, to stick a piece of paper in front of the security camera as he was leaving. He then exited, and as luck would have it, the outer camera failed to pick him up because it was not functioning on this particular day. We don't know if we're correct in our assumptions, but this is what we're thinking. Alright, let's just go back to the crime scene, alright? So we have a crime scene of someone having been killed from a stab wound. He's lying on the floor. There's stacks of money close by. Pools of blood are inching towards the outer stacks of money. A knife has been stuck in a plant pot. And the, tellers are sitting around. Some are standing against a wall. And then in the hallway there is another man holding a pregnant lady to his chest. And that is the scene of the crime as it is right now. Dr. Shea is thinking that the location was where the money was. The occasion was, it was a busy day, and, the victim had to be there for whatever. And the victim was stabbed. So we're not sure, but this is a crime where We're sort of hit and miss in the dark, but we'll go on. And the profile of the suspect, we believe, is this. If the killer had murder on his mind when he had entered the bank on that day, it is possible that all that he had wanted was to just rob a bank. But something may have spooked him, and then he had panicked. It is not certain as to whether or not he had a firm plan in mind. The stacks of money bills left behind may be an indicator that the killer may have panicked at the very last moment. Suspects: Myron Kelly, a young software engineer; Kurt Redden, a young marketing executive; and Lucas Perry, a young stock exchange executive. Well, Alex Kirchhoff has some questions for us to consider, and let's see where we're going with this. Which of the suspects could have been the mastermind? Which of the suspects could have had the best motives to carry out their plan? Could the suspect with the young family be the least of the suspects? How would you then rank the one who loved to develop games versus the one who strongly disliked banks? Who could have had the best skills to do this? Could the killer have known his victim? What could the banking details have possibly revealed? Would the police be able to arrest the mastermind? This is getting more and more confusing to even me. Well, I want to just go back to the description, and maybe this will help you to straighten out in your mind what is going on. They were 3 very close friends and had known each other since kindergarten, and they had practically grown up together. They were very close, and they had hung out with each other, and they were all very good students. They were quiet boys, and which each with their own ambition. A very secret one that they each had in common. They all went to the same university and had done extremely well in their chosen fields. It was just before graduation, and something had happened among these 3 amigos. One night, over a few beers, they had made a secret pact and had agreed to check in again in a year's time to the date. That infamous pact had gone off the tracks and had ended up in murder. The 3 amigos can only speculate and hope. Well, you are familiar with the crime scene. Okay, someone has been killed, and you know who the suspects are. Myron Kelly, he's a young software engineer. Kurt Redden, a young marketing executive. And Lucas Perry, a young stock exchange executive. Alright, so you know the important questions that you need to consider. Let me just go over them again. Which of the suspects could have been the mastermind? Which of the suspects could have had the best motives to carry out their plan? Could the suspect with the young family be the least of the suspects? How would you then rank the one who loved to develop games versus the one who strongly disliked banks? Who could have had the best skills to do this? Could the killer have known his victim? What could the banking details have possibly revealed? Would the police be able to arrest the real mastermind? Alright, that's a lot for you to consider. Now, we're going to go and look at the gathering of the evidence as outlined by Dr. Ryan Martini. The killer had worked for a mastermind. Emails exchanged revealed that the killer had been hired by the mastermind to carry out something specific. He was told which bank he had to go to, on which date and time, and what he needed to do. The killer did not know his victim, but was given specific details as how to identify him beforehand. The killer had been paid cash to carry out his job, and emails found in the killer's apartment helped to identify the mastermind. The mastermind's computers were scoured and incriminating emails were found. A cash withdrawal from the mastermind's account was matched to a cash deposit by the killer. The victim was identified through photos found on the killer's computer. Cell phone calls between killer and mastermind were also used to gather evidence. Finally, based on instructions found on the killer's hard drives, let's go now to look at more about the suspects. And we'll start with Myron Calley. He was a young software engineer, as I have said before. He had gotten married not too long ago, and his wife had recently given birth to a baby boy. As a child, Myron had loved to read mysteries and detective stories, and he had recently started attending a creative writing class. Now his imagination had begun to percolate after the three amigos had discussed their secret ambitions. Next, Kurt Redden. Kurt was a young marketing executive, as I said before. Kurt's childhood dream had been to work for a bank, but those dreams were quickly dashed upon graduation, after some of the banks that he had applied to had rejected him. Kurt had then struck pay dirt about a year after his last rejection, when a large international conglomerate had hired him. But by that time he had developed a strong dislike for banks, and now he wanted payback. And his childhood dream was the perfect way to do it. The opportunity had come when the three amigos had gotten together and they had each revealed their secret ambition. Finally, Lucas Perry, a young stock exchange executive, as I had said before. Lucas had simply loved to design and develop computer games, and he had recently written a game called To Catch a Killer. He had taken his childhood dream very seriously, and he had even fantasized how he could do it. Someday he would do it, but he wanted his fantasy to be reality. For a time, however, he had pushed his fantasies aside to concentrate on more important things. But his secret ambitions had come to life once more after the three amigos had met. Through the eyes of the killer had never intended to kill his victim on that fateful day. He had been instructed to simply play the hero and wrestle the stacks of money away from the bank robber. But when the robber had put up a fight, he had panicked. He had stabbed the robber, left the money behind, and then had left the penknife behind in a plant pot as he fled. Well, the arrest. On a bright, early summer's morning, with the air fresh and pure, the cops came for the suspect. The neighborhood was already awake and moving. Some were already out walking their dogs, while others were either getting their kids ready for day camp or packing the family vehicle for a picnic or a road trip. Everyone seemed to be minding their own business as the cops drove by, but there were those very few who had stopped for a few moments to see where the cops were going. That always happens. So, can you guess who was arrested? Was it the killer or the mastermind? And if it was the mastermind, then which of the suspects? If the mastermind was the one arrested, then what about the killer? And vice versa. Could both killer and mastermind have been arrested? You think? Well, let's go to court, see what happens. In front of a half-filled courtroom, consisting of many curious ones and bank staff, the prosecutor or prosecution charged the killer with first-degree murder and said that he had intended to kill his victim. They further stated that he had done so when he realized that his victim was going to put up a struggle. They also charged that the killer had never really intended to follow the mastermind's instructions, but he had done it for the money and nothing else. They also charged the mastermind as an accomplice to the crime and had pointed to the detailed instructions on the killer's hard drive, those instructions being from the mastermind to the killer. They also sought to link killer to mastermind based on the matching cash withdrawal and cash deposit, and this all being linked from the mastermind's account into the killer's account. They charged that the exchange of funds was made at a secret meeting, and they had pointed to an email where a meeting had been set up. But the killer's defense was as follows. He had tried to stop a bank robber, and in the ensuing struggle he had stabbed the robber. He had not known his victim, and as per the mastermind's instructions, he was supposed to have played the hero. The mastermind's instructions had clearly stated how the killer was supposed to have identified the robber, and the mastermind's offense was as follows. He had not told the killer to kill the robber. He had only instructed him to play the hero. The cash transactions had only happened. We're going to touch now on what's going on in the minds of the jury. Was there enough proof to show that money had been exchanged between killer and mastermind? Nowhere in any of the email exchanges had there been a mention of money exchange. Was there enough proof to convict the killer of first-degree murder? Did he really have the intention to murder? Or did he panic at the last moment? Was there enough evidence to convict the mastermind of complicity? Was the secret meeting between mastermind and killer enough proof that money had been exchanged? Well, outside the court, opinions seemed equally divided. Some had wanted the killer to be convicted of first-degree murder, while others had wanted him convicted of manslaughter. And in the case of the mastermind, they had wanted him convicted no matter what. Well, guilty or not guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of manslaughter, guilty of complicity. The crowd could not seem to make up their mind as to any of it. It was equally divided on all of these offenses: murder, manslaughter, complicity. So now we're going to go on. The killer was convicted of unlawful manslaughter, and that did not come as a surprise, right? The mastermind was convicted as an accomplice. So, after all of this, who was the killer? And who was the mastermind? In this case, the real mastermind was Kurt Redden. He had allowed his strong dislike of banks to get the better of him. First, he had developed a plan, and he decided that he would hire 2 men for the job. The first man would act as the bank robber, and the second would act as the hero. The first was supposed to have entered the bank and demand the money. The second would then save the day and then recover the money. The first had been instructed not to struggle, when the second had reached over to retrieve the money. But something had changed at this point. The second man had been told that the first man was not supposed to have struggled, and he had panicked when the first man had struggled. He took out a small penknife, which he had always carried on him, and had stabbed the first man. He had then fled. Kurt Redden had hired 2 amateur actors to do the job, and he had told each man that it was only meant to be a scene for a drama. The police had completely missed the matching cash withdrawal and deposit between the robber and Kurt Redden. Kurt had carried out his funds exchanges with secret meetings with robber and killer. The police had probably missed the evidence about the robber because Kurt had recruited him at a drama play, and a verbal agreement had been made over coffee. All confusing, but Kurt Redden was the mastermind, and he had hired these 2 amateur actors. Needless to say, both Myron and Lucas were shocked when their friend Kurt Redden had been arrested. The evidence at Kurt's appeal hearing had helped to reduce his sentence. He was charged with reckless behavior, but the charge of being an accomplice was stayed. So there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed listening to this show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. I'd like to wish you a great day and a great rest of the week, and tune in again very soon for our next show. I'm Detective DJ, wishing you a very great day. Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye for